All right. It's good to see that participant number creeping up. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to give it 2 or 3 minutes just to let everyone trickle in here. I hope that you're having a good Thursday. We'll get started in just a few moments as we let these numbers creep up. I can see our participant numbers growing, which is nice. I feel good about that. It's good to have an audience. We do have a Q&A option for this in play. You should be able to drop any questions you have in there whenever you feel like it. It's been a while since I've done a webinar, so it's kind of novel to see my ears disappearing as we go. Let me just start here. With this. Okay, we'll give it another 1 minute just to let everyone settle in. We've got a number of participants here. This should be good. All right, 3:02. I think that's enough courtesy time. Let's get rolling. Thank you all very much for joining us today. My name is Mike Hoye. I'm here to talk to you about finding flow. This is a webinar, and I hope that when you get to the end of it, it will have had all of the qualities that we all want from a webinar, which is mostly that it is useful, that it's informative, and it's not very long. So let's get straight into it. Before we get any further, I like starting all of my talks with some sort of interesting anecdote. This guy on the screen here is a guy named Delancey. What you're looking at here is a woodcut print taken from a late 1800s book called The Evolution of the Thermometer. And the reason I'm putting this up here is that there was a time when the idea of measuring temperature was ridiculous. I mean, it makes no sense to us today because we've had thermometers for our entire lives. But at the time before there was a way of measuring these things, the idea of measuring temperature made about as much sense as weighing a poem. Like, how are you going to quantify this nebulous, ethereal human experience? Right? The idea, in sense, is ridiculous. The idea that you would put a compass or a yardstick on temperature was insane, right? There was no equivalent to it in the human experience. But what do you get all of a sudden when Galileo creates the first thermometer? Delancey, other scientists, Celsius and Fahrenheit, you know their names, do find a way to not only measure, but to very precisely measure temperature. And that's okay, that's a novelty when it comes out. What does it really get you? And of course, the answer, if you're interested in physics or chemistry, biology, the material science is, at first, it gets you nothing. It's an interesting novelty. And then you've used it for a while, and suddenly you have everything. Like you have the bedrock of the future of science available to you now in a way that just didn't exist before. I'm not here to promise you everything. I don't think we're there yet. The science isn't there yet, right? We may not have the thermometer yet, but I am here to tell you that there is a way to get from nothing to having numbers that makes an enormous difference in what you can understand, what you can realize, and what you can do as a manager and a leader of engineering teams. So what we're going to cover today is going to be understanding what that change is, making the case for change. An important idea is the accessibility of the case for change. And after that, we're going into how to plan the adoption of a metric system like the one that Flow enables. And we're going to start telling you about the success stories of some of the people who've been here with us. And before we get in even to that, I want to acknowledge why I suspect most of us are here today. I think, based on past experience with our new clients, I think a lot of us are here because we know that something is amiss. We know we have a sense that something is wrong in our organization, something is amiss, something's inefficient, something is broken, and we don't know what it is. And that's a very difficult position to be in when you're called upon to take action on things that you believe are dragging your organization down, right? It's a very anxious situation to be in. And To some extent, all organizations are like this. All complicated systems that have been successful in keeping themselves upright were born as simple systems that managed to keep functioning in states of partial inefficiency, partial brokenness. Um, how complex systems fail is an outstanding piece of text, and I encourage you to take a look at it. But it's true for human systems as well as it's true for any engineering system. So, but that doesn't seem to make sense too, because a lot of the work that we often do is very easy to measure. It's often like many of the things that we work on as engineers, as leaders, are in some way easy to measure. Dollars, commits. A lot of the things in our work are atomic. Time spent, even things that are on a continuum. Well, we can say we spent this many weeks, we spent this many months on this project. Um, but it's worth saying out loud why we generally have avoided that, why we don't do that, right? Usually the answer to why we have avoided taking these metrics into account, why we have avoided putting yardsticks on people along in different axes, is usually that we tried that once. Like we tried that once. More precisely, we've had that done to us, and it was a disaster, right? How many measuring by lines of code, we know where that road leads, right? How many commits did we make? How many bugs did we triage? It doesn't matter. Most of us have an experience in our pasts where somebody somebody terrible took a metric and turned it into a target, and all of the usual dominoes started falling over. It killed morale. It killed our project. It killed our company sometimes. But somebody made their KPIs, and I guess that's what's important, right? It's not an accident that the phrase, I bet somebody got a promotion for this, has turned into one of the most vicious things you can say about a piece of software. We've all seen that. Um, and that's just why we shy away from it. Like, we don't want to be the person who does that. We don't want to be the person who tries to measure things to make them better, chases those metrics, turns them into targets, and brings the team down, brings the company down with us. Another way to say that is that the idea of introducing metrics, the idea of applying metrics to leadership has an accessibility problem, right? It is an idea that is unsafe. It is an idea that is difficult to convince, that we find difficulty convincing each other that we should try or adopt or adapt to. And that's mostly what we're here to talk about here today. Um, the terrifying thing, a scary thing about metrics is that just the act of introducing them changes the organization you're in, right? Once you've gone from you try to measure the organization you have, and then you introduce the idea of metrics, and that changes things. It changes the incentive. It changes the sense people have of how they're being managed and what's important. You wanted to measure the organization that you have, but you have introduced a metric and that's changed it. And now all you're going to get is the organization that you have now, right? So when you're thinking about accessibility, you might be thinking about things like wheelchair ramps, things like the buttons that open doors for us. And that's kind of what we're talking about. What we're talking about is making a passage easier, making a trip easier, making it easy from someone to get to point A to point B under any circumstances, right? When you go and look at the people who are actually using wheelchair ramps in your transit system, who are using them in your offices, and you actually sit down and just watch one for a while, what you find is that the people actually using these technologies are never the intended audience. We build accessibility ramps for people with wheelchairs, for people with assisted mobility problems. The people who are using them are people who've got a bag of groceries that's a little too heavy that day, somebody who's pushing a stroller, maybe somebody with a briefcase and a cup of coffee who just wants their life to be a little bit easier at that moment, right? So we build these accessibility pathways into our buildings. The cost of accessibility, if you amortize it over the number of people it's intended for, looks very, very expensive. If the cost of amortization gets run over the number of people who actually use it, these tools are as close to free as makes no difference. And I'm here to argue to you today that the same is true of process change. The same is true of cultural change at organizations, right? And the important part there is that accessibility starts with safety, first and foremost. The thing that you are going to be offering as a change, offering as a new opportunity for people, a new way of seeing things, has to be safer than the old way. First and foremost, it can be more beneficial. It can offer a lot of benefits, but the first thing it has to be is safer. Right? So, oh, pardon me, I'm skipping the wrong slide. Uh, just as an example, here is this is a kind of measurement that you can get with you can get this in, you can actually see this in Flow if you zoom out far enough. You can get this kind of information out of GitLab or GitHub or a number of other places. You can gin these metrics up yourself if you want. This is chaos, right? There's no accessibility here. There's no way to make a judgment call that says this is safer, this is more clear, this is easier. This is, there's a path through here that's safer than what we're doing now. If you've got a lot of experience in this space, you can kind of draw two lines through it and say, okay, you can kind of see that we've got three bars of issue here. We've got three general classes of issue, but there's a lot of them. Is there something we can do with that? Even to a veteran of this kind of data, this particular dashboard is not the path forward. This is not a way where you can give people something safer, something advantageous, something that's accessible that they can act on, right? So what you want to do in that situation, what we have to do, I think, when we are introducing the idea of data-driven engineering leadership, of relying on engineering metrics to inform our decisions, is to start with something that is not only small, right? Not only non-threatening, but something where the sense of having participated in this is undeniably a net positive, right? Something that not only seems like a process change that is for the better, but actually feels better in people's day-to-day experience of coming to work, of working together, as working as part of your organization, your company, your team. So this is an example of a place where we can do some very, very straightforward work in Flow. There are a number of such examples where we can get into the data and say, this is an easy win. This is something we can do that is absolutely harmless, but this one happens to be my personal favorite. This is one of the charts in Flow of outstanding work. These are unresolved commits, right? They are, sometimes some of the work is finished, sometimes some of the work is unreviewed. It's just work that is done that is sitting there, right? And the challenge of this is that all of this is effort. Like every bar on this chart represents a team's effort expenditure that has not made it over the line. People have done a lot of work, but have not got it to a point where that work is something they can build on, where their teams can build on, where it can be reliably shipped. And the challenge here is that almost every organization we have worked with over the years has this in spades, right? There is a great deal of outstanding uncompleted work, and it's not work that wasn't done. It's just work that was not built upon, that was not driven to a point where we could do it, we could ship it, we could show it off, we could build on. In particular, I want to call it this one. Instead, this is obvious. The interesting thing about this is that it's simple, it's obvious, it is clear that you can go to any team and just say, look, we have done all of this work, we have to make sure it's over the line. Right? We can make a small change in not how much work we're doing, not how much effort we're putting in, but which work we are prioritizing on a week-to-week basis, where we can say, look, the most important thing I want us to work on now is not new features, it's not building entirely new things. I just want us to make a decision about everything that we've got in here so far. We need to drive the number of outstanding long-term bugs to zero. The interesting thing about this is that it takes zero additional effort. It takes no more work, right? But if we actually sit down as a team and reschedule how we work, we reprioritize it with a message saying, this is how we're going to build on top of each other's efforts more effectively. The difference this makes to any team is enormous, right? All of a sudden, it doesn't feel like work is ever wasted. Not all of this stuff is going to land. Nothing ever does, right? A lot of software development is speculative just by its basic nature. But it does mean if we can say everything in here just needs a decision, we're either going to get it over the line or we're going to get it off of our desks, right? In a sense, this is classic getting things done, except for your team, right? The getting things done book. Make sure that it either lands or it's not on the list anymore, one way or the other. The felt experience of that for individual teams is very nearly magic, right? All of a sudden, the things we refer to as productivity, as team velocity, all of a sudden people can build on each other's work a lot faster. All of a sudden, you have a sense that the work itself is never wasted, right? Even if stuff is speculative, we can learn from it. And the magic of this is that per team aggregate, like this is just a decision for how the lowest level teams are going to work together for a couple of weeks. You turn that around and that ladders all the way up in the metrics to your investment profile, to the how you're investing in software, to the speed with which you are producing things. All of a sudden, that metric ladders right up to your executive summaries, right? The magic of this is that you see a graph that just jumps after you've made a policy like this. All of a sudden, people are spending the same amount of coding days, maybe even the same amount of commits per day, but their impact shoots up, right? The efficiency that they have, you can see that teams will suddenly be more productive. And on top of that, the actual experience of being on those teams is suddenly much more positive, right? And that gives you a story as a leader that you can now tell, that you can say, I made a decision about how we are prioritizing our work and how we're going to work together. And I can draw a straight line from my having made that decision to our team being more productive and to the felt experience of being part of these teams dramatically better. And that is the first step of accessibility. We have taken a decision that makes the idea safe, that demonstrates that there is a huge positive impact of a decision that we made. And that makes it possible for people to believe that not only is the next decision we're going to make by looking at that data equally promising and something worth participating in, but it also means that you're the right person to be making that decision, right? That we've made a decision to change how we measure colleagues' work, our own work, how we're going to work together, and that you as a leader are the person who drove that change, and that now we feel better as a result. We feel better, we're working better together, and that's on you. Like that is, you can point to that graph where that line jumps up and say, I did that, right? That's a real thing that's happened to a number of our colleagues, to a number of our customers, right? I'd like to introduce you today to my colleague, Sage Rozzel. There he is, jumping out. Rozzel is one of our professional services consultants, and he'll tell you more about his role, but we recognize at Pluralsight that this is not a tool that you can simply turn on, right? This is a cultural change engine, and many organizations need the kind of guidance and experience that my colleague Sage and many of our colleagues can provide to you. Sage, would you like to take it away with some of our customer stories?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Mike. Hello, everybody. My name is Sage Rozzel, and as Mike had put it, I am a professional service consultant here at Pluralsight Flow. In the Pluralsight Flow world, I'm deemed as an enablement consultant. So quite simply put, my role is to help onboard and enable teams to hit the ground running when it comes to interpreting metrics and reports and what it means for our organization. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. There's actually two customer stories that I wanted to present today. And the first of which being a customer that I had recently onboarded, and they had quite an interesting story that I wanted to share. So first and foremost, this company wanted to redefine its approach to how they measured and improved their engineering efficiency. And next slide, please. So like many other organizations, there is an inherent problem, right? This particular organization, this company began to embrace agile methodologies and normalize engineering metrics to help really measure that development efficiency. And they began that journey by introducing DORA metrics. And as you know, years ago, this was introduced to the industry, especially as organizations are becoming a little more dependent on software and software, as it's based around their business. But they wanted to implement DORA metrics into their development teams to better understand their delivery process and how could they effectively support their teams better. Months into their journey, though, they did realize that the 4 metrics alone, and 5 if you count reliability that comes with DORA, they realized that didn't really offer a complete or actionable view of their engineering teams and how that correlates from their inputs to their outputs. And DORA metrics can be viewed as lagging indicators, which are quite namely reflecting on events that had already happened without offering a clear understanding or interpretation of why or how to influence these outcomes for the better. And certainly month-old metrics do not paint that clear picture on the variables that can be influenced in order to better get us in alignment with our company's vision for delivery and servicing our customers. So to combat this reactive approach, the company sought out a partner to help them identify points of their workflow, bottlenecks, roadblock issues that needed some upgrading. And that particular venture led them to exploring Pluralsight Flow. And with Pluralsight Flow, we have more so of leading indicators, so metrics and measurements that'll help you predict and influence those results. Next slide, please. So with adopting Pluralsight Flow, they gained this enhanced visibility into their team's day-to-day workflows. And coupling this with their recently acquired Dora metrics, this organization now has signals pointing to specific components of their workflows, whether it be their commit messaging, whether it be their pull request process and how they collaborate, but all with the fresh mindset on how to have these conversations and ask the right questions without it seeming too punitive or like we're playing the blame game. So during onboarding, specifically with myself, I showed them the leading indicators of flow metrics. And again, going back to our commit-based activity and our pull request-based activity. And again, these were all components that were directly correlated to the contribution and collaboration signals. So by partnering and kind of taking full force onto these leading indicators, this allowed them to ask deeper questions that really truly supported their teams and their corresponding workflows, especially when it comes to a more recent time period. So Dora is really helpful when it comes to retrospecting on maybe sprints or maybe larger sums of time periods. But with Pluralsight Flow, they're able to get from the day-to-day to the week-by-week experience when it came to their development teams. But as you know, it's not just about tracking numbers or how they are trending. But the overall timing of those numbers and their corresponding inflection points are what's actually important when it comes to interpretation. So for instance, for any organization, a different productivity might seem concerning, but if it aligns with a critical release or a deadline, then the timing changes that interpretation. All right, could you really imagine waiting until after the sprint is over to course correct and prioritize the right work? No, right? You want to have day-by-day insights to really help tell and narrate that story. Instead, this company had the insights within days that really helped them ask the people involved to ask the right questions to make sure that we're all in alignment with how we're delivering and what are the expectations on those deliverables. So post onboarding, there was a specific event that involved a senior architect who spent around a week solving a performance issue. And although they got to that point of solving that issue, the code change was minimal. So while the metrics might have suggested that the particular team or that individual had low productivity, the timing of the work, addressing a key performance problem, that's what truly mattered. Next slide, please. So this particular experience, really underscores that metrics, no matter what metrics are used or when they're used, that the interpretation should be supplied within the right context. So lagging indicators, going back to Dora metrics, if they were to solely use those to kind of narrate that story, right, it would have shown a low activity environment, especially with that particular development team, which could have brought plenty of retrospective sessions depicting that root cause. How do we strategize and move forward with that particular outlier example and really massage our processes to accommodate that. This allowed them to check in real time with that organization, with that individual, so they can be better informed, so that way they can make more justified decisions, right? Especially with the following context. They were all more informed, aware, and calm rather than acting in a state of escalation, worry, or panic. So leadership should understand that the data alone is really just not enough. It must be understood in the broader picture, the bigger context of the whole organization, external stakeholders, the development team, the partners with that development team, so on and so forth. But by combining Dora metrics with leading indicators, and specifically for this organization, they focused on PR time to merge as well as their commits per day to really navigate the productivity with their respective organization, business unit, so on and so forth. By combining Dora and these leading indicators, they were able to create a more proactive, data-driven environment that enabled these real-time insights and continuous process improvement, all the while obtaining a more efficient, higher-performing engineering team, which instilling a little bit of trust when it comes to the partnership between product ownership and the development teams. Next slide. I'm sorry, I forgot to ask you to move to the next slide. But yes, the particular outcome is, again, they were able to now foster a proactive, data-driven environment. Next slide, please. Now, the other example that I had is necessarily about scaling a business. Next slide. And this next organization that I wanted to bring up is currently undergoing a transformation after acquiring another organization. And this is another fairly common use case that we see with our partners, with our customers, where they have this way of wanting to work with each other by accommodating everybody that is a higher performing engineering team or a leader within these teams to help foster an environment where we're taking into account all of the different workflows that could potentially arise. So the problem with this company, more so, is that they had two different business units that had their own ways of working. They had their own cultures, their own ways of problem solving. And both of these teams had delivered remarkable results in the past. But the acquisition itself presented a chance to combine the strengths from both of those teams and build something more powerful. The leadership team saw an opportunity to align the engineering strategy, optimize their workflows, and scale operations efficiently. Next slide, please. So what did they do? Well, the company focused on several key areas. First and foremost, investing in tools and platforms to help promote that collaboration across teams, regardless of their location, and as well as introducing shared workflows, communication tools, and best practices, all with the hopes to standardize these processes and enable everyone to work towards a common goal. And flow became essential in refining that workflow. So by providing the visibility into activity and key metrics, the tool was allowed the team to analyze their progress, pinpoint these inefficiencies, and ensure that the workflows are optimized for both speed and quality. Now, the two different teams, just as a little bit of context, the first team had a process where they had a lead or a principal engineer that did a bulk of their quality, maintaining the code quality and doing the review process. Whereas the other team had a situation where a lot of the junior developers and senior developers took a stake in ownership in that review process. And the metrics between these teams were actually very, very similar, but you could see that very clearly the team that encouraged everybody, a part of that team, to do that review process, they had a quicker throughput when it came to closing out their PRs, when it came to their time to merge, which is a metric that is presented in Flow. So as you can see, very foundationally, there's just different ways of working, and this allowed this organization to unify on a new engineering strategy. Next slide, please. So throughout all of our onboarding experience, the company now has adopted a data-driven approach with continuous optimization, again, going back to the real-time insights into key development metrics to help identify bottlenecks, streamline operations, and adjust those processes themselves. So this allowed the company to scale intelligently while maintaining that agility and high performance, even after an acquisition, and trying to make everybody play nicely together. So the end result is, again, a unified engineering framework that amplifies the strengths of both teams and positions the company for scalable growth. Okay. So thank you for allowing me to share my stories today. I'd like to invite Mike back on camera here. And this next slide on the webinar is a way for you to connect with us. Mike, back to you.
Thanks very much, Sage. And 329, we might just hit this one right in the nose. This is how you can connect with us. There's one question in the chat about what specific metrics Flow considers leading metrics. We pull in information from GitHub and other Git source control repositories. We pull it in from Jira and other issue tracker and project management repositories as well. The short answer is that we slice and dice all of that up into various different metrics, like coding days, time to merge, outstanding PRs, commits per day. We have some other more granular, interesting ones like time to first commit and responsiveness that reflect a team's willingness to respond quickly to each other's work and build on that other work. I would like to have a longer conversation with you about that, but I can see the seconds ticking down here. This is how you can get in touch with us personally. If you would like to know more about Flow, this is a place where you can go to get in touch with us for a demo. I'm grateful for all of your time. Thank you very much for joining us. That brings us to 3:30 on the nose. I'm going to be hanging out around here again just for a little while to talk, take and answer any questions, but that is the meat of the presentation. Thank you all very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. And there we go. Stopping the screen share. Thank you all again. I'm going to hang out here just for a couple of minutes. Sage, thanks again for your help. Have a very good
Yes, of
day.
course. Thanks.
Oh no, I just realized I've automatically flipped my background, so my flow logo is backwards. Rookie mistake. All right. Okay. So offers open. I think that I will keep it here for a few seconds. We have 13 participants remaining and the time is dropping. Those of you who are still listening to me ramble, thanks very much. Please enjoy your holidays. I hope that I hope that the season treats you well.